This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.
President Bola Ahmed Tinubu has approved the Renewed Hope Infrastructure Development Fund to facilitate development in chosen infrastructure projects across the country. Now, these projects include the construction of roads, rails, ports, and airports, as well as agriculture across the 6 geopolitical zones in Nigeria. This fund, which subsumes the Presidential Infrastructure Development Fund, is targeted at enabling President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's push for foreign direct investments. Joining us this morning on the conversation is Oluwasomi Akosile, a research and strategy analyst at Greenwich Merchant Bank. Mr. Akosile, good morning and thank you for joining us on the conversation.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me.
What is your reaction to the approval of the Renewed Hope Infrastructure Development Fund?
So firstly, right, I think it's a welcome development, right? Looking at, the objectives of the fund. Earlier on you mentioned some of them, right? And basically, I think the aim is what's it called, cover up infrastructure deficit gap, which is estimated to amount to about $35-40 billion. Looking at key objectives, right? Basically, establish innovative infrastructure development across different sectors: agriculture, education, healthcare, transportation, aviation, and the likes, right? And I think the drive basically is, steer growth. You would recall that the administration has the objective of hitting a $1 trillion economy by 2030 or so. So I think this is one of the vehicles that should drive that ultimate goal. So I think it's a good one. However, there seems to be some gray areas, right? It's not the first time we're having such, just like you mentioned earlier, the fund is supposed to subsume the Presidential Infrastructure Development Fund, which was set up, I think, in 2018 by the Buhari administration. One would want to ask, why not just continue with the PIDF? Why do we have to come up with something new, right? And we are having to start raising funds for it. What was the success of the PIDF? The monies that were raised through PIDF, how well were they implemented? What objectives were achieved? When that fund was being established, right? So, going through the press release from the fiscal authorities, right? I think they identified some constraints with respect to how the PIDF went, constraints with raising funds, some bureaucratic and institutional challenges, also stalling projects that were not realized at the end of the day. And according to them, the Renewed Hope Infrastructure Development Fund is supposed to, cover up those gaps and be more efficient and, drive the expeditious delivery of this project. Raising of funds could be an issue, right? They stated some of the sources, multilateral loans, institutional investors, pension funds, and the like. The modus operandi for which those funds would be raised would be something that we'll look forward to communications later on. However, I think the questions Nigerians that would be burning in the hearts of Nigerians would be, okay, if we are going to be raising this for this, how sure are we that, this objective will be realized? We've always had budgets, even not talking of special funds. We've always had fiscal budgets every year, and a good portion being allocated to capital expenditure. What has been the implementation success, with respect to capital expenditure? Trust deficit is pretty much high. I mean, just a few weeks ago, there was the talks of budget padding controversy along amidst the National Assembly. So, a number of these questions, especially with regards to, transparency, right? Yeah, transparency, accountability around all of this, and just making sure that, at the end of the day, we are not just rolling around, cycles and just bringing up things just to suit, the public hearing.
Right. So even with all this in mind and looking at what this particular fund intends to achieve, you've equally mentioned the fact, rightly so, that in 2018, a different fund, the one that will be subsumed, was created, the Presidential Infrastructure Development Fund. So the direct question is, do we need to have special vehicles to implement these plans around infrastructure, investment in agriculture, the building of ports and airports? Do we need to have separate, separate vehicles for achieving them outside of the existing systems that we have presently? I'm talking about ministers, the MDAs that we have in Nigeria.
Yeah, so I think it's necessary, right? Looking at number one, the level of infrastructure deficit we have currently, and the amount that would take. I mean, so my thought is the large amounts of money that is required to fund, this project, may not be something that, at this point that can be absorbed into, yearly budgets, right? There needs to be that sort of, should I call it a backup, that will support yearly, budget allocations for capital expenditure. Yeah, so I think, looking at this new fund, right, startup capital estimated about 20 trillion naira, $14 billion, in dollar terms. So I think it's inevitable, right? So I'm looking at where we stand. I'm looking at, current fiscal constraints, right? So I think the what's it called? The game changer here would be how well would this be transparent? How well would the objectives be achieved, right? Because again, my thought is you're raising these funds, right? You're driving this project, and in all drive economic growth. You want to make sure that this project are feasible enough and come on board early enough to be able to attract foreign direct investments, because that's one of the goals that was stated for the fund. So I think it's a good one. I'm sure in other climes there would be such kinds of funds, right? However, the aim of the funds should be achieved, the objectives should be achieved, and there shouldn't be some form of misappropriation or gray areas that would start begging questions of what the essence was in the first place.
Well, Mr. Akosile, thank you very much for speaking with us this morning. Our guest on the conversation is Oluwasomi Akosile. Mr. Akosile is a research and strategy analyst at Greenwich Merchant Bank, and he joined us to speak on the establishment of the approval, rather, of the Renewed Hope Infrastructure Development Fund by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu.
This is Radio Now 95.3 FM. Come for the news, stay for informed conversations.